I'm Devin Lenz. My company's Lenz Sport. I build mountain bike frames and ski bikes. And he's going to ask me a dumb question.
I've kind of noticed that you have an affinity possibly for something that I do as well. Do you like the color Kawasaki green?
Oh yeah, yeah. Green is
Me too.
Is the color. it's I don't know why I like it, but kind of pops for me.
I've always liked it.
Well, first when we start to run a frame, we'll figure out what kind of material we need. So we'll order all the materials in and we get it in. It's basically big bar stock. Once we have the materials in-house, we'll have to cut it into blanks that we can machine into the right shape. So the bar stock gets cut up into little bricks that we'll put in the CNC machine, and we'll cut it into the appropriate shapes. Some of the parts we use sheet metal, and when we get that in, we have to cut it on the sheet metal shear into shapes that we can fit into the mill, and we'll cut it on a big plate. So most of the parts we use for the bike frames we machine out on the CNC milling machine. Our machine has 21 tools, so we can do a lot of machining in one step. Most parts take at least 2 steps, sometimes up to 6 steps. What we'll do is we'll use our AutoCAD drawings that we import into a computer-aided machining program, which is called a CAM program. We can generate a program for the CNC machine that'll machine the parts out for us. So with the CAM program, we can watch the part being made on the computer monitor before we even start cutting parts. Once we get the parts out of the milling machine, a lot of times we have a little bit of handwork we got to do to finish up the part, clean up the burrs and make them look nice. Once we have all the parts made, we're just about ready to start welding. First we have to clean the parts. A lot of times we use an acid solution to etch the parts to kind of clean up the surface so it doesn't have any impurities in it. A lot of the parts we put together on a jig before we weld the whole frame together. We call this a sub-assembly. So we can do as much as we can before the whole frame goes together. This also helps accuracy to make sure sections of the frame are perfectly aligned. So once we have all of the parts and sub-assemblies ready, we'll assemble everything together on a frame jig where we assemble the major portion of the frame. And we'll try to weld as much as we can on the frame jig so it comes out aligned as well as possible. After we pull the frame off the frame jig, we can finish welding up the little areas that we didn't get on the main frame jig. And then with an alignment on the frame on alignment table. So before we send the frame off to heat treat, with a final inspection, a final alignment to make sure the frame is still straight, it's ready for the finishing. We usually either use anodizing or powder coating on our frames. So for powder coating, we just got to make sure that there's no dings or anything that was messed up in heat treat or scratches, deep scratches, and stuff have to be cleaned up so that it won't show under the finish. Anodizing is a lot more critical on the finish work, because anodizing doesn't cover any kind of blems. So sometimes we have to really polish a frame out if we really want to have a nice finish. We'll use a lot of air tools. We use DA sanders, we use little angle grinders with 3M polishing discs. Then we'll also run the frames in a vibrator machine that'll scuff the frame down. It's kind of like a giant rock tumbler. We'll clean up the surface and get it ready for polishing. Once we got it as blem free as we can, we'll go over and run the machines on a buffer if we want to have a real polished finish. Buffing is probably one of the dirtiest jobs, so we try not to have to do it too much, but it sure looks nice when we do it that way. So once we get the frames back from the powder coater or the anodizers, we still have some machine work sometimes before we assemble a frame. So we'll chase out the bearing pockets and ream the head tube again. Usually we wait to thread the bottom bracket and ream the head tubes and all the critical interface parts of the anodized frames until after it's back, because sometimes the anodizing can burn off a lot of material, which will make things out of tolerance. So yeah, we cut the bottom brackets by hand. We got big taps to tap the bottom brackets out, and it's all done by hand. It takes a lot of elbow grease. So once we have all of the parts together from the anodizer and the powder coater, we can assemble them all. Usually we have a lot of bearings to press into the appropriate places. We use a bearing retaining compound to make sure that they don't shift or come loose or squeak. Assembly time is definitely a time you want to make sure you keep your hands clean and always keep cleaning the frames, because a lot of the oils and the Loctites and stuff we use can stain a frame. Kind of stinks when you got a brand new frame with a big fingerprint on it that you can't get out. Each frame probably takes about an hour to an hour and a half probably to assemble. Most of us here specialize in certain areas. I do a lot of the welding, or most all of the welding myself. We got some guys that do pretty good at machining. Some guys are good at a lot of the finish work and stuff, but we all kind of take turns and kind of contribute to the assembly of the frames. Putting the decals on, that's definitely a very critical step. Got to make sure that they're put on right. So usually we'll have the guy with the best hands. It's not a lot of mathematics, not a lot of science or anything to the way the decals go. We just try to make sure that they're centered on the tube as best as possible, so when you're looking at it from a distance, they show up nice and uniform. We pretty much make all of the parts in-house here. I'm pretty specific about the way I like things laid out. Most of the stuff that we do you can't really buy anywhere. We make our own down tubes because there's nothing like them out there, nothing that we can use that's stock, from another company. So we go to the extra effort of trying to make our own design so that they work exactly the way we want. We even make our own cable stops, because really we don't see anything out. I haven't seen anything out there that I like. Yeah, that's a benefit for us because we have full control of every aspect of our frames. Every part is made to our specification, and there's no question as far as if they're done right.
I want one of your bikes. I'm gonna make it a personal priority.
Yeah.